Excellent. All right, welcome everybody. Happy Monday. Hope everybody had a nice, relaxing weekend. We're so excited that you came to Power to Fly to hang out with us for another amazing chat and learn. So hopefully your Monday's been going pretty well, and this will be a nice way to keep easing you back into the work week. Now, I'm really excited to introduce our first guest, but before we do that, I just want to go over a couple real quick housekeeping items for all y'all, especially if you haven't joined us for a chat previous to today. So welcome. My name is Meg. I'm part of Power to Fly's virtual hosting team, and you are about to participate in an amazing chat and learn that we are partnering on with Autodesk. So I hope that y'all will feel encouraged to participate in today's event, especially if you took the time to be with us for the live session. So please feel free to turn your cameras on if you would like. No pressure to be Insta perfect. Bring your, 4-day messy buns, furry coworkers, non-traditional workspaces, child coworkers, whatever you got. Please feel free to join us. Now, you don't have to turn your cameras on to participate. You don't even have to turn your cameras on at all if you don't want to. That's totally fine. But if you do come off mute at any point during today's session, you will show up on the live recording and the live stream. So if you do want to participate, which we highly encourage, but you have any kind of privacy issues or anything you're concerned with, that's okay. You can still participate via text. So you can always write any questions or comments that you have for our speaker in the group chat. You can also DM them to me if you would like your questions or comments raised and you would like to be kept anonymous. Now, before we get going full on and I get to introduce you to our speaker, the other thing that I want to highlight, like I said, is today's session is being recorded. So whether you, anybody that registered for today's event, whether you stay, you didn't even make it, whether you stay for 5 minutes, jump back and forth, doesn't matter. Everybody that registered is going to get a link in their email in about 1 to 2 business days that will have it'll give you a link to where you can rewatch today's session on powertofly.com. Now, let's say that Terry says something absolutely mind-blowing and you cannot wait to share it with a coworker or a relative or a friend. No worries. You can always head over to our YouTube channel. We're live streaming there right now, and we post all of our YouTube, our chat and learn videos to this YouTube channel. You can always go back and check them out. They're usually posted within about 5 to 15 minutes of the end of the live stream. So absolutely, we would very much encourage you to check that out. That way you can send the video anywhere you want and you don't have to wait. Now, if you do want to, you can keep up with us on a variety of social media channels. We are on YouTube. We also are on, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram, in addition to those. We are at Power to Fly on all. And if you'd like to take photos or videos as we go to share what you are learning with the rest of the world, then please feel free. We would love to have you. All right, so before we introduce our guest, I just want to highlight real quick that she is here on behalf of Autodesk, who are a company who is a Power to Fly partner, and they are hiring. Now, I'm going to put a link into the chat right here to where you can check out their company page on powertofly.com. And this is going to be a great place for y'all to go to take a look at some of the open roles that Autodesk has right now. Let me grab that right there. There we go. So I just put that into the group chat link for y'all. It's going to take you to a page that looks just like what you're seeing in front of you. The only difference is they actually have 675 roles currently posted with us, as opposed to the 671 you see on the screen. So if you're interested in Autodesk, or if anything that Terry says today kind of prompts you to want to know a little bit more about the company, you're going to want to check them out here. You can apply for jobs straight from this link. You can also check out some of the Autodesk events, both past and future, that they have been involved in with us. And one of the other things to know about this is that there's a follow button or an I'm interested button that's at the top right-hand corner of that company page on Power to Fly's website. Clicking that follow button does a couple of really great things for you, but basically it works like your friend at the company. It's going to tell Autodesk that you are interested in working with them even before you fill out an application, but it's also going to let you know when they post new roles. So it's a really good way to make sure that you stay up to date on what they have going on. They don't fall off of your radar and you don't fall off of theirs. So absolutely take advantage of that, that feature of the Power to Fly website if you would like. Now, last before we jump in here is I'm really excited to introduce you to our speaker for today. So Terry VanQuickenborne is an organizational development and leadership professional, as well as an executive coach. In her role as global head of L&OD at Autodesk, she leads the design and delivery of enterprise learning, talent, and organization development strategy. So, Terry, is there anything that you would like to add to this introduction, or any link that you have, with the subject today that you think is important for the readers or for the attendees to know?
Yeah, thank you. So first of all, I'm really excited to be here. I think this is such a critical conversation at this point in time. So, I think one of the things that I would add to this is I'm part of the overall culture and capability team here at Autodesk. So working really closely with my colleagues in culture and in diversity and belonging, as well as learning and organization development. So collectively, we're really addressing this topic right now. It's come up. I mean, I think it existed prior to the pandemic, but we all know that during the pandemic, this has escalated, or maybe just we've shone light upon what burnout means in organizations. And then in addition to this, I'm also senior faculty with the Josh Bersin Academy. So we've been spending a lot of time also looking at burnout and wellness. And so I think it's going to be an exciting session. I'm sure there's going to be, heaps of comments that come through, but I'm just really excited that we're talking about this today.
Me too. I'm really excited to jump in. Okay, so with that, I want to give y'all one look at some of the principal themes that we're going to go over in today's conversation. Now, you can see them on the slide in front of you. We compile these based on conversations with our speakers prior to the events, as well as by looking at the questions that you all sent in when you registered for today's event. Now, if you have additional questions you'd like to ask, please feel free. If you, let's say we go over one of your questions and we maybe don't have the context right, or there's some more details that we should know so that we can give you the answer, the kind of answer that would help you. So please feel free to let us know that as well. Like I said, you can come off mute to participate. You can also add questions or comments into the group chat, or you can DM them to me. Just know that if you have a question, we want to hear it. Ask early, ask often. Don't let time run out on today's session before you get a chance to ask what you would like to know from Terry today. So like I said, we're going to try and go over some of these topics that you see in front of you, but just know that if you took time out of your day to spend with Power to Fly and with Autodesk, we want to make sure that time is well worth it. So if you have something you want to know, please ask. Please know that you can drive today's conversation. So we're going to talk a little bit about how to identify when you are burned out and how to address that issue, especially with your manager. We're going to talk about some ways that you can support colleagues who are also dealing with burnout, and ways to discover your strengths as a strategy to help you avoid or mitigate that burnout if it might, kind of feel like it's creeping up on you. All right, so Terry, to get us started, I know there's a couple of kind of baseline questions that we wanted to talk about. The first one that I thought was really important is, how do you know when you're burned out? How are you supposed to know if it is kind of just one of those days, or if this might be the straw that's going to break the camel's back?
Yeah, I think this is such a critical question. And so, the word burnout is floating around the lexicon these days, like everybody's burnt out. And so there is a tendency to be really tired and to go, okay, I'm burnt out. But I think we need to look at the difference between stress and burnout, and when, chronic stress actually leads to somebody being actually burnt out. And so, if I look at the two, stress is being you're fatigued, you're probably more tired than usual. You may have a loss of energy, like it takes extra to get going, but you can still rally behind things and find that energy. There tends to be like an over-engagement when you're stressed out. And I know I'm subject to this myself right now, is that it's hard to actually turn off. You think about work all the time, or you think about things all the time, that your brain keeps going. It may cause anxiety, a little bit of tension. You might have stomach problems, or an elevated heartbeat, or dizziness, or you're just like, I'm stressed going into this. Your emotions might be reactive, like you could be easily triggered. You might be easily irritated by coworkers or friends or family and start to lose patience. And I find with stress, there's always sort of this sense of urgency, like, I got to get this done. Oh my God, it's urgent. When we start to actually shift over towards being burnt out, that fatigue starts to look like chronic exhaustion. So it doesn't matter if you've had a full night's sleep, you might still feel, incredibly tired. You might feel drained mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. You have a loss of motivation to do things. Like it just feels like, gargantuan to get things done. Rather than over-engagement, sometimes when you're burnt out, you go into a state of disengagement. Like you just don't care. You get, apathy comes into this. You might be operating in depletion. And so rather than being reactive to emotions, it's almost like you lose interest. You don't really care anymore. So you might start to feel like detached from your emotions, like, this is all going on, but I'm kind of numb to it. And rather than a sense of urgency, it can go into a sense of hopelessness. And so all of these things is when you're experiencing stress like this, what one has to be really careful of is that all of this can actually lead from anxiety shifting over into depression. And so I think that's one of the things to be really mindful of, like, is this a point in time? Or is this chronic? And at what point do I have to stop and actually say, I'm actually starting to notice that I'm feeling apathetic and hopeless. And that's the time to, all along, it's always good to manage your stress. But when you're really starting to feel like you're ending up in that burnout stage, time to sort of take stock and sit back and say, what can I do about this?
Okay. Now, let's say you don't have a great idea of, how long this has been going on. Maybe it's a situation where it's been going on a lot longer than you realize it, but because it's sort of what's around you, it's become normal, right? How do you know, or how should we try and understand when it might be time to take it easy, or when it might be something that if we push a little bit further, we could reach a goal that would help help address that burnout feeling?
Yeah, this is going to be entirely individual, right? That we all have different capacity to manage stress and such. I think the important thing is to check in with others, to really be vulnerable and open and courageous around what's going on for you. To understand that if you're still excited about things, like if you haven't reached that point of disengagement and you're still excited, then, you can continue to push towards that goal. One of the things that I do is I try to time block and say, okay, here's the goal, here's what I need to get done. And time block it around, like I'm feeling energized right now, so I'm going to use that energy to actually get through to this. But if I do find myself in a state where it's like, I just don't have the energy to do this, I have to figure out this, then ask for help. And which might be the most difficult thing for people to do is just say, here's what's going on for me. I've kind of reached the threshold. Where can I get support from others in terms of reaching this goal? So that's asking for help, I think, is the most critical thing that you can do during burnout. And it's the thing we often do the last.
It's really hard to ask for that help, especially if so I've been through this a couple times in my life. And I feel like that was the point where I knew I needed I knew that burnout was coming, because no matter what I did, I couldn't logic or reason my way into be like, okay, but you should just ask for help. You should just ask somebody to help you out with this. Linda's actually asking a really good question. How transparent should we be with the HR department about what we're going through? We also had another person ask questions about how do you manage that burnout if you are the manager of a big group? So let's look at, kind of the practical applications of this. Let's say if you are just an individual employee, how transparent should you be with HR or with your manager?
I think it's really dependent on your level of psychological safety, with your manager first and foremost. But I think with your HR department, I think there's always individuals within your HR department who are there to help you. Most organizations will have an EAP program. And so I think, utilizing the resources and services. and you've got your HR individuals, you know, your HR managers and stuff there to support you in terms of dealing with these things. So I think it's important to be transparent. Really, until we can be transparent, we deal with it on our own. I think it's equally as important to be transparent with your manager. You know, we all operate differently in terms of dealing with stress and dealing with burnout, and so, you know, we have to be open to everybody's perspective on how things are landing for them. So if you've got a good relationship with your manager, it's having those conversations often, you know, checking in often, and so that it's not reaching a point where you're already burnt out, but that you can have those conversations along the way to say, hey, you know, I'm feeling a little bit of pressure around this, or, you know, I'm really stretched right now, or this is, you know, additional stuff that's going on in my life, and I just need you to be aware of it. Because I think one of the things that can happen is that when you're not transparent about things, particularly if there's circumstances going on aside from work, if you're not transparent about it, what can cause additional anxiety or stress is then feeling like you're not good enough, that you're not actually meeting your goals. And so it starts to layer on until the point where it then becomes like, for what might start as like a little pinch point, becomes this big thing that you have to deal with. And so along the way, I think it's just really important to be transparent with your manager. And because oftentimes they just don't know, you know, they might not know what's going on, and they're making an assumption that things are great, particularly, you know, if you are in that state of stress where it's a sense of overengagement and a sense of urgency. Sometimes people say yes more often, even though they really want, you know, everything in them is screaming no, they'll just say yes. And so, you know, if you continue to say yes to things and your manager's not aware of it, it makes it more challenging for them to be able to support you. So be as transparent as possible, I would say.
I do like that advice. All right, now what ends up coming in this, or are there any differences in what your advice would be if someone is in a management role and realizing they're reaching burnout versus someone who is managed by another person?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I think it's contingent upon the manager to be honest with their manager around what's going on, as well as actually being honest with their team, you know, so because likely if the manager's burnt out, the impact on the team will be felt for sure. And so I think, you know, when we start to look at heart-centric leadership and empathetic leadership, it's contingent around leaders actually understanding how they're showing up and the impact of their leadership. So I think actually as a manager to one, actually understand where you are at the spectrum between stress and burnout, to have those conversations with your manager, but also to be transparent with the team to say, hey, you know, I'm feeling this lately. I'm struggling a little bit with everything that's going on. I want you to be aware of it. Because I think what happens when you're not transparent with your team as a manager, it's really easy to, especially if you're getting reactive and triggered. What you don't want to happen is that your team actually then has to figure out, is it me? Is it her? Like, what's going on? And so if I come into a meeting and say, you know what, here's what's going on in my world this morning. You know, the dog was sick last night. I'm working on minimal sleep, so I might be a little crunchy today. Then at least they've got the context of that, rather than you coming in and just being sort of impatient, reactive, which then leads, you know, your team to go, oh, was it something I said? And that can lead your, you know, other people to go down a spiral. So sometimes providing that context is critically important, so that everybody just stays above the line and sort of knows this is what's going on, this is what we're working with. The other thing that I find is sometimes just naming it. There's this concept of like name it to tame it. And so sometimes just being like, I'm just in a really bad mood today, then it sort of lightens the load of it a little bit. Like, I'm just feeling really stressed out, and I'm naming it so I can actually effectively start dealing with it. So something I think is critically important, is just being as open and honest and vulnerable as you can be.
Yeah, I really like that. And you're right, being able to volunteer that information and just say, hey, my set point might be a little bit closer to like the irritated point as opposed to I normally am. And you're right. I mean, that can be a lot of overshare for some people that are not comfortable with it, but it's not really, right? You're just telling people like, hey, here's what's going on. Because if you think about it, you're effectively trying to limit that ripple effect of I'm not doing super great. It's going to rebound and kind of splash on people around you, and have that outwards impact. So yeah, I love that method of addressing it. Okay, so we are getting a lot of great questions in the chat here. So I want to make sure we keep looking at those. There is one that's coming up that's going to handle a bunch of the other questions that we are being asked, but I will save the ones in the chat, so hopefully we can get to them as time allows. Let's talk a little bit about recovering from burnout. Are there any habits that would really help, or what should your first step be towards kind of shaking off and overcoming that burnout feeling?
Yeah, I mean, I can only speak to this, not as an expert in burnout. I just want to caveat, because I think sometimes when you reach a point of actual burnout that leads to depression and stuff, then that is something that you probably need to, determine with a healthcare professional. That being said, some of the things the habits that you can form in terms of recovering from burnout or mitigating that point when it's stress to burnout. One is, first of all, is determining, like, are you in stress? Are you in chronic stress? Or are you actually in a state of burnout? And really doing an honest assessment of where you're at with that. I think it's critically important to develop a support network around you. We go back to being vulnerable and sharing what you're going through. And so that support network could be your friends, your family, your partner, or it could be, at work. And I think it's important that you actually bring in people, bring your manager into it and such, so people know, particularly with friends and family. I think it's so important to have those conversations, because oftentimes we put on the facade at work, right? We show up in the Zoom meeting and we're happy, or we show up on social media and it's like, God, your life looks great. And back in the background, you're just like, I'm pulling my hair out most days. And so, with your friends and family, to have somebody to be able to check in with you, I think is really important. I was out on Friday. We had a day of rest at Autodesk, which was lovely. And I was out with a good friend of mine that I probably hadn't seen in about 4 years. So, and we had this great catch up. And she had given me this little phrase, which I just loved, was, what filled your thimble today? And, oftentimes we think of like what fills your bucket, and that can actually feel a little bit daunting because it's big, right? A bucket is huge. And it's like, what are all these things I need to do to fill my bucket? And when she asked the question, what filled your thimble? Like, I just thought, oh my God, that's it. It's like these small little wins that you have, because filling a thimble is much easier to do than filling a bucket. And so it was something that as I was preparing for this talk today, I thought, this is a little gem that I'd love to share with people, is finding those little things that will fill your thimble. And it could be reading a great article. It could be, catching up with somebody that you haven't caught up with for a long time. It could simply be saying thank you to a compliment. So finding little things that are going to actually fill your thimble, spending a little bit of time, snuggling with your pet or whatnot, or having that chocolate croissant, little things like that. I think the other thing in terms of a habit around dealing with burnout is learning how to effectively set clear boundaries, and then communicating those boundaries with people. So knowing, what you're capable of. As an example of this, when we had our day of rest, I was like, oh God, I'm just going to take the day and do nothing. And then this friend reached out to me, and originally I was like, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to add another thing. And then I realized what I really am lacking right now is connection with people, just due to the fact that we've been in a pandemic. And so it was like, I'm actually going to take the time and I'm going to make conscious effort to go out and connect with this person. But what it also meant, I was like, okay, I've got a dinner that I had last night. Is I'm like, Friday I'm going to go out, Sunday I'm going to have this dinner, and Saturday I'm going to cancel my plans. And so that was a little bit about my boundary setting, is being able to communicate with another friend on Saturday to say, I got too much on this weekend. Can we reschedule to another week? And she was like, absolutely, totally get it. So boundary setting, I think, is really, really critical, particularly in a work environment, so that your team and your boss understands this is what you've got capacity-wise right now. I think it's just critically important to do that. I think the other thing is one step at a time, is not trying to go from, wow, I'm completely burnt out, to I'm going to be completely not burnt out within 3 weeks. It took you a long time to get to burnout. It's going to take you a while to actually, come back from burnout. So finding things that work specifically for you. There's a lot out there right now around all the things you can do. You can meditate, you should exercise, you should eat healthy, you should do a gratitude journal. There's a lot of shoulds out there around being able to deal with burnout, which sometimes can feel a little overwhelming. Like, oh my God, if I'm not exercising every day and writing my 3 gratitudes at night and meditating and eating kale 3 times a week, it can feel like it can almost add to the burnout, like I'm not doing these things that I should do. And so it's really important to find the things that actually work for you, that actually will help to alleviate your stress the way that is going to be contingent to what's going on for you personally. So I think that's really important. Okay, I think I'm blathering on here.
No, not at all. That's honestly why we have you here, is to listen to you talk. So thank you so much. No, I think that was really great. And it also spoke really well to a lot of the stuff people are saying in the chat. People have, Anne said they always start their dinner conversation with, what did you win at today? Nice. And I think that's really, really great. We also have a bunch of people with additional questions. So I've been grabbing those. So hopefully we can circle back and fill in these. A lot of people loving the filling the thimble concept. It's Shar even agreed with you. Shar says, I was burnt out for 8 months and work in sales and product design. My motivation and creativity fell down to crap and it destroyed my confidence. I think finding a way to rebuild confidence and strong boundaries might be the key. I can absolutely second that. Boundaries are hard. Boundaries setting is very difficult, especially when, like you love your workplace, or you love your coworkers, or you are one of those people pleasing kind of, individuals. It can be very, very difficult. Now we did have a lot of questions from people that wanted to know, let's see here, there it goes. How to overcome some of that negative headspace that you can really easily get into while you're working. So there are a lot of people, obviously, that may not be resourced enough to be able to, afford to take time off, or, maybe your company doesn't offer, break because of a burnout. So are there any ways people can try and overcome some of that negativeness while they're still going through it, or while they're still participating in the thing that seems to be causing the most of it?
Yeah, I mean, negative headspace is a tough one, because you're in it, right? I think there's ways in which that you checking in with yourself to really understand what that inner dialogue is saying to you. We spend more time in our heads than anywhere else, and so to start actually tracking a little bit. Are you saying to yourself, like, I'm so tired all the time. I hate this. What is wrong with me? Things like that, like to actually understand the dialogue that's going on is really important to be able to address it. Like, what are the things you're saying to yourself? Are you catastrophizing things? Are you celebrating? Like, are you actually giving yourself kudos when you have those small wins? And how can you reframe things when you are catastrophizing things? So I think that's really important to be able to do. There's a lot of resources online around like how to stop negative self-talk. To be able just to, and it's hard. Sometimes it feels really, really weird to be like, kudos to yourself. But I think it's really important to be able to do so and to really understand the dialogue that's going on. Even simple little things like, we're in the rainy season here in Vancouver right now, and it's really easy to go outside and be like, oh, this sucks. It's raining all the time, rather than like, wow, we really needed this rain. Like, it's just rain, right? It's neither good nor bad. It just is what it is. And so it's really important to look at, how do you ascribe judgment to things, and sometimes when you're in it, it's hard to actually step back from it and say, oh, I think I'm being a little judgy with myself. But trying to find those little ways that you can do that. There are other things. There's I don't meditate. I find my brain goes off in too many different directions. I know people who have had great success with meditation around negative headspace, as well. Being grateful for things, like simply noticing things, and making it a habit. What I've suggested to people sometimes in coaching conversations is, like, have a little note pad next to your desk, and actually just make it a habit of like writing things down, like, that was good, like, wow, I really appreciated that today, or whatnot, just to start shifting the negative space, because negative headspace becomes habitual. And it's easy to get into. I would also say contract with your friends or your coworkers around, like, catching people doing things right, trying to break out of the habit of, I call it recreational complaining. We get these dopamine hits when we actually gossip and complain. What you want to try to do is get the serotonin hits when you're actually being more positive about things. So, like, how can you actually stop going down the rabbit hole with people around, like, oh yeah, I noticed this too, and so-and-so did this, and try to get into a virtuous cycle rather than a vicious cycle. So it can be tricky, but there's small little ways that you can do it, in terms of just being able to sort of recognize, these are the good things that are happening. This is what I did today that was really great. Chunking out your goals into smaller pieces, I think, is important, so it doesn't feel like a behemoth goal that you're constantly struggling with, but actually breaking it down into, here's the small components of a goal, and look at me today. I got 2 out of 3 things that I needed to get done today. That's awesome. So finding ways to do that is going to be important.
Yeah, for sure. All right. So we're getting great questions here. One of the ones that I wanted to, we've got we've got a couple more on the wanna-do list, but I think these cover a couple of things there. So let's see. A lot of people wanted to know if you had any suggestions for getting either male leaders or people that just don't ascribe or don't really believe in the concept of burnout, and how to address it when toxic positivity is the culture that surrounds you. And I think this is, it's not a new term for sure, but it's definitely been kind of a buzzword for me in the last couple of months. So can we address, like, maybe ways that you could kind of introduce this, or could try and help make this more of a recognized thing at a company where everybody is trying to just be positive all of the time?
Yeah, I mean, toxic positivity is, I think, has equally as negative consequences as negativity, because there's a lot of shoulds attached to it. And so, when we get caught up in the shoulds, I remember one of my coaching faculty, when I did my certification, I had one woman who said, you have to be careful that you're not shoulding all over yourself. And I just loved it, because it was like, oh, that's happening again. I think it's being able, to start having those courageous conversations with people when it is, overly positive, to be able to say, actually, this is really what's going on for me right now. And I'm finding it a little overwhelming to do all these positive things. Like, right now, the reality is this is what I'm dealing with. It takes courage to do that. And I recognize that oftentimes when we're in a state of burnout, I forget who had said it in the chat that, your confidence sometimes goes down to be able to sort of stand in, in your own 2 square feet that you occupy in this world and say, this is what's going on for me, can be a little bit challenging. The good news is that I think a lot of organizations, particularly over this last 18 months, are recognizing that empathy is critically important, listening is critically important. I fully believe that we're making a shift in the way that leadership looks. We need to get there still. It's going to be a bit of a journey. Some people are already there, but I don't have the full-on answer for this one. Like I wish I did. But I think it's really around that degree of transparency and just saying, okay, if somebody's like, hey, just, pull yourself up by your bootstraps and get on with it. It's just like, it might be spending time with your manager or whatnot, saying, this is going to be the consequence of me trying to do that. And so here's what here's what we need to get done. Here's what I think your expectations of me are. Here's how I think I'm going to be able to do this, and I need your support around being able to do it. And so just, breaking it down around what needs to actually get done in the organization or in the team to be able to have those conversations. And it's not always easy. I recognize that this is not a blanket solution, because you're dealing with people, and people are messy at the best of times.
People are, yes, absolutely messy. I think that's a very good way to put it. There are a lot of people, coming in on the chat here with a lot of really great stuff chiming in. And I absolutely second, Terry, what you had said, kind of prepping your manager or talking with HR and being like, hey, here's what's facing me. And it might even be a situation, to speak to the person who is trying to get away from that toxic positivity. It might even be a situation of trying to like pull studies or pull out some stats or something that relates to either the money at the company, whatever, like the primary focus and, real achievements and real goals of the company relate to. Is it for profitability? Is it for, growth in this specific department, whatever? And, try and show them ways that this could actually benefit the org, because if you're not having to replace people due to burnout, then, you're saving money there, blah, blah, blah. So that might be a really good way to approach it, especially if you are in that situation where everybody thinks that the bootstrap mentality is what will help fix it.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, all studies indicate that we don't do our best when we're overworked and stressed. Like it doesn't actually, if we actually pull back on things, you actually get more productivity out of people. It's rather than just sort of this make work and the hamster wheel. And so, I think the last 18 months have, unfortunately, our work days have expanded because people aren't doing commutes. And, I certainly know that, we get meeting requests sometimes at ungodly hours. And I'm like, this is one that I'm not going to do today. So also finding those ways around, do I have to be in every meeting? What can I say no to? What can I actually go back and say, I'm going to just watch the recording when I can? Do I specifically, asking that question, what do you actually need me for in this meeting? So I think there's ways around doing that as well. But I to your point, Meg, I think having some of that research behind things to for people who aren't willing to budge around these things might be important, if that's the thing that actually resonates with them. So it's it's a little bit challenging. Somebody might be like, I'm not interested in research, but there's always a time if you're really fully burnt out and you're not getting the support that you need, by all means, reach out to your HR department and such, because it might be just a difference in perspective and such. But, again, find the support network around you that's going to help get you through this.
Yep, I completely agree. We are getting a lot of people in the chat chiming in about, where their support network is. And sorry about the weird noises, y'all. My neighbor's getting their roof redone. So hopefully that doesn't impede too much on most people's enjoyment of the audio today. Kay Murphy had shared people that, are your like emergency phone a friend kind of people, people that will listen to you and help you feel heard. And I think that's a really great way to try and, try and keep yourself, or do things that will help you instead of things that, if they don't work, are going to absolutely, add to the work plate or add to your stress levels. All right, let's talk about some of their strengths. So when it comes to avoiding that burnout and relying on our strengths to do so, how do you recommend we do that? Because it kind of seems a little bit, it seems to fly a little bit in the face of what we were talking about earlier of like, really taking stock and seeing where you need to cut back. How do you think of like, that evaluating or leveraging our strengths can help us with burnout?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So for me, I ascribe to the Marcus Buckingham definition of strength. So a strength being an activity that actually strengthens you, that that will draw you in. It makes time fly by while you're doing it. It makes you actually feel strong. And so I think when we start to think about strengths and really recognizing what are those things during the day in my work that actually I get excited about, that make me feel strong. I think doing more of those actually can help mitigate burnout. And what I find is that a lot of times people just don't, they think of strengths as the things that they're good at. Now, you can be good at something, but you'd rather, stick pins in your eyes than have to do this activity. So starting to understand, like, what are the things during the day, the activities that you do at work that actually fill you up, that you actually get excited about doing. We all have stuff in our jobs that we love, and we all have stuff in our jobs that we loathe. And so I think understanding what those things are, what are the things that you love doing, and what are the things that you really don't like doing. What I tend to do around my strengths is I time box them. So like I sandwich them. If I have to do something that I really don't like doing, I'm not super fond of budgeting. And yet, that it's a big part of my role is managing an L&OD budget. What I try to do is I time box it. So I've got, this is the amount of time that I'm going to work on this. And I actually have like an activity that I love doing on either side of that. And I always try to finish my day with an activity that strengthens me rather than drains me, particularly if I'm going into a weekend. It's just like, so trying to do more of those things that you love. And sometimes it's about understanding what are the strengths of your team, working that together, because there might be things that I really don't like doing, and it's somebody else's strength that they love doing. So is there a way to say, hey, I'm feeling a little, burnt out right now. I'm spending 90% of my day doing things, activities that weaken me, that I really don't love doing, that I procrastinate on. Is that you tend to love doing these things? Like, can you just kind of change it up and collectively work on your individual strengths? So I think that's a way to avoid burnout. If you're doing a lot of activities of stuff that you love doing, chances are you're going to feel less burnt out because you're actually engaged in things that you enjoy. But first and foremost, it's actually understanding what those are.
Yeah. No, and I love the idea of not only leaning on your own strengths, but those of your team, really assessing where y'all can help each other out. And not just ways that you can get help is great. Because like you said, somebody might need help on a task that really you actually absolutely love to do. They hate. If they need some help on it, you might be the person that's able to help break them out of that situation as well. So definitely something to think about. All right. So let's talk a little bit about, let's say like you've gone through this burnout, you are trying to go back to work. Are there any ways that you should prepare for this return, or things that you need to know about addressing that career gap if you have one due to burnout?
Yeah, I think with any career gap, it's when you're coming back, whether you're coming back into your organization or you're going into a new job, if you're coming back into your organization, obviously people may know that you've taken some time off and such. And so then it's about really being clear and contracting as you come back into the organization around, again, setting your boundaries, being really clear on expectations, almost like contracting up front with your manager. If you're going into a new position, part of it is around creating your resume around things that you've accomplished and such. And if you're in interviews, people are reaching out to you because of what you've presented. I don't think people are looking so much at career gaps as much as they used to. And I think, I saw somewhere in the chat that somebody said, should I be honest about, it was because of burnout. I think you can be honest to say, but you might want to frame it in a way of, there was unclear expectations, or there was, what you're looking for is a more balanced approach to work, but it's going to be critically important for you to be looking at organizations where the company culture is going to align with your own values, and sort of understanding, what is the way of working and such. But I think I think gaps in career are not seen as something, 10, 15 years ago. I think we all looked at, why the big gap. I think these are more common. People are going on sabbaticals. They're taking time off to travel. They're taking time off just to reflect. So I don't believe it's as disconcerting to employers anymore when they see a gap. But I think it's actually important to probably say, this is why, and this is what I'm looking for. This is going to be important to me as I go into a new environment.
Yeah, no, I think that's especially important to remember. Especially we've got a lot of people that are chiming in saying that they're not even going into a new job, they're going into their old jobs. And trying to, prepare for what is likely to meet them there. Do you have any advice for those people who are going back into a setting where maybe they didn't feel able to set boundaries, and now it's going to be much harder, or where they are worried that of like maybe the perceptions around taking time off for burnout?
Yeah. I mean, I think the thing is that you really have to look at if you're going back into a situation, like you say, it's just after you've taken some PTO. It is really important that you're going to have to set boundaries, because the thing is that if you're going back into a situation, what you don't want is to have taken time off to sort of recover from burnout and then go back into the same cycle. And so this is where working with your HR department is going to be really important for you to say, hey, I don't want to go back into this. I want to add value to the organization. I want to feel confident in the work that I'm doing. This is what I need to enable myself to do this. And, as an employer, you're going to get the best out of me if we have clear expectations and clear boundaries set around how we do things. Not always easy to do. I recognize this, that it might, I'm seeing somebody here saying about, the relationship between a toxic workplace and burnout. And so sometimes it's not easy to do. I think if there is a high level of toxicity in the organization, one has to ask themselves, like, is that the organization I want to be part of? And I'm not advocating anything here, but it's just, but I think, you have to look individually around what works for you and what doesn't. Does this organization enable you to bring your greatest strengths and contribution to bear in the organization? Is there the possibility that raising these questions will actually shift the toxicity? So it takes a little bit of courageous conversations to get these things going.
I think that, that's a really great note, because you're right. There's a lot of people with questions around, kind of how to address this, especially when I know that there's a couple of people that wrote in with, kind of that burnout being part and parcel of maybe a larger mental health issue. I know I faced this in a massive way. I got diagnosed with bipolar depression last year. And so that kind of flipped 35 years of dealing with my own, what I thought was, habits or laziness or whatever. And so getting that kind of getting that diagnosis definitely coincided with a big burnout moment for me. And so that was a situation I was also in, where I was trying to figure out how to talk to like professionals, like, talk to my manager or my coworkers about this. But also figure out a way to, kind of talk about either coming back once you start feeling better, or, ways to like kind of, taper off what your duties are. And it can be really scary. Is there maybe a way to assess what that psychological safety might look like for somebody who's never had to think about something like this in terms of their own workplace? Is there a way you recommend kind of putting out feelers to see what the response might be? Or does it really just require that bravery as long as you feel safe to do so?
I think it's a combination, Megan, and thank you for being so vulnerable and letting us know this, because I think it's important. One, I think you have to feel, there has to be a level of psychological safety that people feel. If you don't feel it, if it's completely absent, that's going to be particularly scary to be that vulnerable to say, hey, I've been diagnosed with this, and this is how I want support in helping me, be fully functioning in the workplace. I think for those who are not familiar with it, like when it's a new concept of like, what does psychological safety mean? I mean, it's just, it's that degree of trust that you have in individuals. This is where I think it's important that you might start with your HR department and get advice from them. It's finding ways in which to have those conversations with your manager and your team. I had a situation in my previous organization where we did have somebody who was dealing with a fairly serious mental health issue. And we rallied the team together. This individual said, I want people to know because I need support in the work that I'm doing. Took some time out, took several weeks out, and then slowly integrated back into the work. And we just had we had this individual come in and talk about their experience of what they were going through. And part of it was, this individual said that this is what they wanted to do. So we didn't say, you have to do this. Part of it was destigmatizing things around helping the team understand what this looked like. And therefore we could all support this individual in coming back to be able to do great work. And so I think, again, it's building up what is the support network around, really relying on the HR individuals, in your organization who can help those conversations to happen. But yeah, I think we're at a time right now. I mean, I can't remember the latest stat that I would have seen on this in North America, and I've got to think this goes beyond North America. The amount of time out in organizations, the amount of when you look at benefits being used around stress, anxiety, depression, it's in the billions of dollars. and so we have to deal with this at an organizational level. We have to be able to actually destigmatize. We have to focus on well-being and actually destigmatize what we mean around mental illness and such, because we're pretty good at understanding, so-and-so had a heart attack and therefore is going to be taking some time off work, and we're going to integrate them back in, slowly but surely, and ensure that they're set up for success. But we have a different perspective often when somebody's had a mental health crisis. So how do we actually integrate that individual back into the organization? And we've just got to get better at it. I think one of the things that might actually be a benefit, I hesitate to say this, but maybe a benefit of the pandemic, is it surfaced a lot of these things. People are talking about burnout in a much more transparent way than we ever have, because it's allowed us to.
you have that window into your coworkers' lives, right? You have that window into like, here's what my reality looks like, and here's what I'm living with. And I have my own workspace, and I only live with my husband and two dogs. So there's a lot of stressors that I get to avoid. But then looking at somebody else's, you get that window into what that person's dealing with. And it's so valuable. But yeah, you're absolutely
So
right.
valuable.
Being able to talk about these things, like I have like no shame left. It's just gone. I don't have it. So and I kind of use it and use, disclosing things like that, obviously, like, in a smart way, but I also use it to gauge a little bit about what people are about. Because if you're gonna, kind of fire back at me and be a little unpleasant, or, in some way like mock me about it, okay, that tells me a lot more about who you are as a person, a lot. And that, for me at least, knowledge is power. But it also is very scary, and can be very scary for people that don't feel like they have that support or don't feel safe enough to ask. We did have a lot of people with really great questions, and I don't think we're going to be able to get to all of them. But please send in those questions. I'm more than happy to save these. So hopefully we can maybe have another segment on this sometime soon, since obviously burnout is far more common around the holidays in a normal situation, not completely exclusive or separate from the pandemic. All right, Terry, before we lose you today, I just want to go over real quick some more information about Autodesk, and questions and some answers that we had asked Terry prior to today's session, so that we could get a better understanding of what Autodesk is really like, and what kind of support you've gotten from them. So you described the culture as inclusive, and said that your favorite part about working at Autodesk is these incredibly smart and passionate people. Do you think that working with passionate people helps encourage and helps inform that culture of inclusivity at Autodesk?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, I think, we have people in our organization who are just so dedicated to what they do, and dedicated to really, I mean, it astonishes me at times, actually. So like our, individuals within my team, certainly I see Chris is on the call, so thank you, Chris, for being here. Our culture and D&B team, our Autodesk Foundation. I mean, we're just always looking to actually make the world a better place, through design and make externally. But when we look at internally, it's like, how do we continue to support people around really enabling them to thrive? And so I think working with passionate people, it is not to say that we don't have people who are not burnt out, or, or heading towards burnout. And sometimes I think, being passionate, because you keep driving right towards this, that sometimes that it can actually lead to it. We all have to collectively take a breath sometimes to say, are we putting the oxygen mask on ourselves to enable these things to happen? But yeah, I would say working with smart, passionate people, we're constantly looking at, like, what does inclusion mean? What does belonging mean? How do we actually ensure that this is happening at Autodesk? So yeah, it's great.
Yeah. All right. So your top tips for someone who's interviewing. My favorite is one that we've been seeing a lot more frequently lately, and I absolutely love this one, is to remember that you are interviewing the company as well. Now, like I said, this is one of my favorite tips for a lot of reasons, but is this your favorite of the ones you've listed, or is one of the other, one of your other tips something that you think is the real standout that people should absolutely take from today's session?
Well, I mean, I think that, and knowing your strengths, and one of the things that I've said to people, just coaching them around interviewing, is that oftentimes, like, we get caught up in the great shiny objects of a job, and you start to look at, like, what does this job actually entail? And I had somebody who was looking at this job just going, oh my God, it's amazing, the title's amazing, and I'm like, okay, so look at the activities, like, are you excited about that? And they started to go through, and they're like, I don't like, 90% of the job, they were like, I don't want to be spending my days doing that. I'm like, not the right job for you then. Like, find the stuff that's going to bring you joy, that you're going to actually be spending, at least 75% of your day actually working within your strengths. So I think that is super important. And it's we can often get seduced by titles and things, but it's really looking at what does the job entail. So, but yeah, interviewing the company is so important to make sure that that it's going to be a place that you're going to actually really enjoy being.
Absolutely. And just as a aside, because I know we are at time, but I want to remind everybody, especially if you had questions along the lines of, where to reach out, or if HR doesn't feel like a safe space, kind of take in Terry's advice about interviewing the company. Ask for the things that you think you need. Hey, do we have an EAP program in place? And if you don't, ask them why not. Ask them if it's something that like they haven't seen that much of a need for, or just ask them. You can't, there's nothing wrong with just asking the question, and their answer will tell you a lot. Are they excited that you're bringing up something that they didn't know was an issue and they'd love to be able to address it? Or are they really wishing that you hadn't brought this up at all? These are important things to know, and it might be as uncomfortable as I've found it in the past to utilize some of these things. It's uncomfortable, and it's uncomfortable because it's showing you, things that you maybe didn't know about your current place of business before, or things that you maybe assumed were one way and maybe aren't that way. So I just want to, put that out there as the advice that Terry is giving you is very, very, very important and can be utilized in a lot of different ways. Terry, I just want to say a big thanks to you. We've got a ton of people in the session who are absolutely loving the things that you've had to say today. A lot of people saying they can't wait to share the recording. So thank you so much for taking time out of your day and sharing your experiences and your opinions with us. We really, really appreciate it.
Oh, well, thank you all. And I just hope everybody here is not already at the stage of burnout, that you just take time to really, put your oxygen mask on and just, take care of yourself and fill up your thimble in ways that make sense for you. Thank you, everyone.
Absolutely. Every drop makes a puddle, right? And even if all you're trying to fill is that thimble, every little drop counts.
Exactly.
All right. Thank you to our attendees as well. Y'all came through with some great questions. I'm sorry we weren't able to address all of them, but I hope we were able to address enough issues that you could gather at least a couple tips for how to handle your own situation. I really hope that y'all had a good time at today's chat. It looks like everybody has. And hopefully we'll be able to host some more chats along these lines, since clearly this is such a large and important topic for so many people. I hope everybody has a wonderful rest of their Monday, and I really am excited and hope that this maybe sets the tone for the rest of your work week. Ways that you can avoid some of that burnout going into the first of the next two, at least in America, major holidays that we're going to go through. Hope everybody has a great rest of your week. Can't wait to see you all back on new and upcoming chats with Power to Fly. And I think that's it for the day. So thanks, everybody. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.